All right, it's 10 o'clock now, and I believe that time is very essential for all of us, and I would not keep you guys waiting for too long. We hope that the other attendees that have registered will be able to join us when they become available. Welcome to another exciting Max Geo webinar. Today we'll be talking about sample dispatch submission. My name is Larry Miracle, and I'll be your presenter. I would aim to finish the presentation in about 20 minutes, and we will have enough room for questions. Sample dispatch submission is a tool that is designed to manage the dispatch submission of samples to a laboratory. The sample dispatch submission entry form allows sample IDs to be associated with analytical techniques based on lab contracts which have been entered into the system. This webinar will demonstrate the process of capturing and storing information that can be used to track samples before, during, and after dispatch to the laboratory. Let's begin by looking at the contract entry form. When you launch your data shared platform, one of the things you notice is that your extensions are attached to one of the modules that you have configured DataShare to work with. In this case, my extensions are attached to my database management module. And in this list of extensions, you will notice the sample dispatch submission form here. It's empty because we haven't entered any information into it. Before we go into the sample dispatch submission form, we need to look at the contract entry form. This is where we enter all the contract details that are essential for us to design an efficient sample dispatch submission. In the contracts that most mining and exploration companies will assign with a laboratory, it will specify some key elements, which is the methods or the services that are expected from the lab or requested from the lab, and the cost associated with each of those services. Let's begin by creating a very new contract. Under the bottom of this form, there is a tab here called New Contract. Let's click it, and then I'm going to enter some high-level details. We need a contract ID, so we're going to be using ALS as our lab for the sake of this webinar. So I'll say ALS, and then you can give it any other subscripts or suffix that you want. I'll call it 1901. That's our contract ID. Maybe I'll say ALS sample dispatch 1901. Here is where we enter the duration of the contract. Companies might establish a 1 year contract, 6 months contract, whatever type of contract length, so that you know that the prices for your services are at least fixed within the calendar year or your budget year for the company. We will choose the dates 1st of January. We'll pretend that we're in 2018 and we're planning this for 2019. So this is the 1st of January 2019, and then we'll go all the way to the 31st of December. Once we have chosen that time frame, we need to put some description here, and I'll just call it ALS Assay Contract 2019, just to help us put some relevance to the information we are capturing. Here is where we choose the lab. That's the contractor going to process our samples for us. And here I select ALS Perth. That's the lab I'm going to be using. The contract type is assay. And then the contract code. If your accounting department generates a contract code for you, you can enter it in. If not, we use our default NR, not recorded. And then here we choose the universally accepted US dollar for most international transactions. Under client, you can choose your own company name, whatever the name of your company is. In this case, we don't have, so I just choose NR. You can put further comments that will help you put enough significance or relevance to the contract you are generating. Once we are done, we hit the save button and it's saved. Now let's close it for now and then just re-enter it and see what has happened. Now once we open our contract form, you can see that we have that contract we just created. We have all the details of the contract. Now we need to go in here and now define the tasks that we are going to be requesting the lab to perform. In this case, I want to send the samples to be processed for gold using the AU A23 and AU A26 methods that are specific to ALS Chemex. I'm going to come in here and hit add new item. And here is where I'm going to type AU AA23. That's my method. The category type is going to be assay suite. And here I'm going to put in a few more information about this method. It's a trace level gold 30 gram by fire assay method. Now we need to enter the cost for processing these samples using the A23 method. Let's assume ALS gave us a price of $12.06, 60 cents, sorry. Now this price is related to each sample, so we need to choose the category because there are different options you have here, but we choose each. So $12.60 for each sample. We need to select the lab here, ALS Perth, and then go and select the method as appropriate, AUA23. And then here we add the elements that we're going to be analyzing for, which is gold. When you're done, click add and you're good to go. We can add another method. I did mention that I want to add two methods. So A26, which will also be part of the assay suite category. And this is an all grade 50 gram fire assay gold method. So you can put a description here. Again, usually this is a bit more expensive than the A23, so we'll leave it there as $14.5, and it's going to be for each sample. Lab code, we select ALS Perth, and then the lab method, we go down and select A26. Again, we are analyzing for gold, and then we hit add. So you can keep on adding as many items, in this case methods or services, as you want. You can add all your prep code and everything here, multi-element, whatever services you want the lab to perform for you, they can all be added here. Once we are done, we hit save and we're good to go. Let's close the contract entry form, and now let's go to the sample dispatch submission form. Here we're going to capture quite a few important information. We have these tabs here: dispatch, comments and disposal, instructions, consignment summary, sample summary. We need to start from scratch. So let's start a new submission. Let's go to new, and I'll give it a name, MX Web Sample Submission 001. We're going to use the contract ID we created, which is this one, ALS SD1901, and you can see it picks this up right away. Now, who is dispatching these samples? Let's choose somebody here from the list, and then let's give this a PO of 1. And then what's the expected turnaround that we want from the lab? I'll give it 21 days. Here you can add few pieces of information here, and then we want to be invoiced. If you have a cost code entered into your system, you can enter it here as well. Now, if these samples are going to be dispatched for a particular tenement that you are aware of, you can select it here in your tenement list. We need to add a few more information here. We want the pulps to be returned to us, and then we'll define the pulp return date. Let's choose a date here. We just choose today's date, that's fine. And then pulp return location, not recorded, we don't know it yet. and then the prep return, we can choose again any dates that you want here. Let's choose today's date for argument's sake. Now once this is done, we're good to go. Let's make sure we've saved that, and then it's saved. We move on to the comments. Sorry, before we go into the comments, we want to do something here. Once we've created this dispatch header information, we want to select the samples that will be dispatched, and there's something else that we can do. So you can hit this generate sample list, and then it brings you to this form. In this form, you can see the dispatch that we created and the contract ID associated with the dispatch. Imagine you have multiple data sets in your project. You can select the data set that you want to deploy the samples for. Now, we don't know the number of samples and the different type of samples in this data set. So what we can do is to click this button. By clicking all, it will list all the samples that are in this data set. Let's assume we want to dispatch samples for a particular group of samples. There is one that starts with PS. So I'm going to choose that and then run a search. Once we do that, it gives us a list of all the samples that have a prefix of PS. Now, I don't want to dispatch all these samples. So I'm going to show you how to select samples, particular samples that you want to dispatch. Use the left key and shift button, and you can select the samples. These are a group of samples I want to select. Now, typically you might have either all the samples that you want to dispatch might have the same method, and so that's fine. But even that, you still need to assign the list of samples you've selected to a group so that you can assign that group a particular method code as appropriate. But let's be a bit fancy here. Imagine that we have two methods, AU23 and AA23 and AA26. We don't want to dispatch all the samples to be analyzed for all of them. So let me show you how you can do if you have some samples that will go in for only gold, some that will go in for gold multi-elements, some that will go in for two different type of gold analysis. You will notice that once I selected my samples, there's a group assignment here. Now, if I hit this button here, group samples, all of those samples have now been assigned to group 1. You can scroll down and see we started from suffix 172 to 180. Now, assuming that we want to assign another group of methods, another group of elements or samples to another group of elements. So let's just go in here, and we ended at 180. Let's take 181. Again, I'm just picking this random to 190. Now, if we want to group this differently because of the treatment we want the lab to give to these samples, you just come in here and click on this, and you notice that it's changed to group 2. If we now say group samples, you will notice that all the samples we just selected from 181 have now been assigned group 2. The first group ended at 180. Now, this means that these two sample groups are unique in themselves. Now, let's close this for now. Now we need to assign the laboratory procedures that will be specific to each of the groups. You notice that once we did our sample generation, these total samples have now been updated. We didn't have to manually update it. Let's go into let's go into assign items. Now, this is the group that we created. We created one group and then a second group. Now, these two methods are available. So let's select this group, select that method, and we hit assign. So all the samples in group 1 have been assigned to AA23. Let's go to sample group 2. In sample group 2, we still have all these methods available. Let's select all the methods, and then let's hit assign. You notice that we have assigned AA23 and AA26 to group 2, which means that all the samples in group 2 will have the trace element method as default. And if there is any overrange results that we are receiving because of high values, then we can run the all grade 50-gram file say. Now all the information that is associated with the group is all listed here. We are now good to go, and we'll move on to the next stage. Now we need to capture a bit more information that will give the lab some guidance as to what we want. Let's go into comments and disposer. Here we have to write notes for the lab, which is very typical in very traditional procedures that are in the field. You have to type this into an Excel spreadsheet or a standalone PDF form or write it by hand. But here, Max Joe is providing us the opportunity to capture all of this directly in your database system. So let's say we're testing for webinar samples. You just enter this information, and then what's the quality control notes you want to give to the lab? You can type whatever you want to give to them, but here I'll say follow standard procedures as per contract. Your contract document will actually have more detailed information, so by making this reference, the lab knows exactly what to do. What's the prep dupe disposal request you want the lab to pursue? You just say standard. The lab knows what the standard prep dupe disposal procedure is. You can do the same thing for the pulp disposal and the reject disposal. Under hazardous, if there are any hazardous materials that you think may be associated with your samples, you can mention it to the lab. I'll just type something here for argument's sake. Asbestos material. All right. Once this is done, you can hit save, and it's saved. Now let's go into instructions. Under instructions, you can put in a few more information here for the lab as well. Who is going to be receiving the report from the lab? I'm going to put my name there just so that if anything goes wrong, I'll be the one to be blamed. That's fine. And then if you have other parties in your company, maybe your vice president, other colleagues in your team, you can also put their emails here, list all the emails of people who will be copied in this report. Now the invoice will be sent to Larry, who is a geologist and a responsible person. And because we are actually not going to be getting a physical mail sent, but rather electronic mail, we'll just leave these two boxes. And now here we can just put in additional information, testing for webinar. Okay. Now we're good to go, and we can save this. It's all saved. The next thing that we need to do is to generate a consignment. Now, your consignment is actually your shipment. And so imagine you can create different dispatches, and those dispatches will be actually sent through the same shipment. And so imagine a drill campaign where you're collecting a lot of samples, you create all your dispatches, but then you say we only ship samples last day of the month, and that shipment can have many dispatches that have been created. Now your dispatch could either be via road, in the air, by boat, whatever means that you choose. It's all up to you, but you can capture all of that information here. Now we need to create a new consignment that will be associated with this. And so we use this modify or add consignment tab here. When you click on this, you get this form which is called consignment. You notice we don't have any consignments here. So let's create a new one. Under new, you can enter the new consignment details, consignment 001, and then let's add a bit more information. This is the dispatch that it's connected with. It pulls our contract automatically. What's the depot where it will be picking from, not recorded for this purpose. And then let's go into a sample packaging. We will choose crates. That's the samples are going to be in crates. And then how many samples were we going to be dispatching? There were 19, as we saw earlier on. The name of the dispatch transportation company, we'll just choose Big Truck. What date do we expect them to pick the samples? Today. We're in a rush. And the delivery, we expect it to arrive, let's say, by Friday. So once we are done entering this information, we hit done. And then you can see all of that information has been captured. And then we can hit close. And that's it. So let's go into consignment. You can see that the consignment we created right here has been captured in this form. So now we have the list of information that will guide us to know the shipment pretty much that is related to these samples. Now we go into sample summary, and you can see the summary here. We have the first batch of 9 samples. We have the starting sample ID, the end sample ID. Same thing for the second group. And here is the breakdowns. First group is only getting A23. Second group is getting A23 and A26. Now let's close. Let's go back here. Now we have finished capturing all the information that we need. We want to generate a report that will show us the form that we have just made before we email it. You can do a print preview here, and this print preview will give you the list of all the, let's just zoom in here. You can see all the information we captured for the dispatch and then the transportation. Usually in the past or in certain projects that do not have this kind of versatile and smart systems, you can imagine entering all of this by hand. Somebody will be given a list, they have to refer to the list back and forth, and the tendency to create error in dispatching samples or having people dispatching samples that are actually overlapping each other is something you cannot even avoid. But using a data management system like this, you know that everything is tied to the database, and once this sample list is generated, nobody can generate another list that conflicts with this unless the integrity validation rules in the database permits them to do that. Now what you can do is to email this submission. Remember we had this email list, email information that's been provided here. Once you're ready, you can just click email sample submission, and here you go. Here you have the list of the person who is going to be receiving the email or the people that are copied into it. And if you want to preview it, you can just click open, and here is your form. It saves you a lot of time. It saves you a lot of data repetition, entry errors, and this form is ready to go. In my lifetime as a geologist, I had to always enter this by hand because I didn't have MaxGeo Smart Solutions. But here we go. You don't have to do it as I did it because most of you are using MaxGeo Solutions. This is the end of the presentation. I am very happy that you made the time to attend. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you very much.